On 5 News, the British tourists failed by Tunisian police. A terror attack on a beach resort. A coroner calls the response shambolic and cowardly. Now the families of the 30 who died are suing the travel company they say didn't warn of the risks.
If I had been provided with the terrorist information, the descriptors, at the time that I'd gone in to book, then I wouldn't have been booking a holiday to Tunisia.
Also tonight, Sir Philip Green pays up. The former boss of BHS gives £360 million to help plug the company's pension hole. The breast cancer surgeon accused of carrying out dozens of unnecessary operations to make more money. And out of this world, the 2 space tourists going on holiday around the moon. Could the idea take off?
Would you like to go up there?
Yeah.
Tell me why.
Because it's going to be bouncy and fun.
Hello and welcome to 5 News. I'm Sian Williams. They were on holiday, relaxing with friends and families, enjoying an early summer break on a Tunisian beach. And then the unthinkable happened. A lone gunman, Seferdine Rezgui, pulled out an automatic rifle and opened fire. His murderous rampage lasting for more than 20 minutes. 38 people were killed, 30 of them British. They were aged between 19 and 80, married couples, brothers and sisters, fathers and sons. Today, their families were in court to hear a coroner deliver a verdict that they were unlawfully killed and that the police response was at best shambolic, at worst cowardly. 5's chief correspondent Tessa Chapman was in court.
After 6 weeks of often harrowing evidence, families arrived at the Royal Courts of Justice this morning for the end of the inquest into their loved ones' deaths. It would be another emotional day. Taking them back to June 2015, when Seferdine Rezgui strolled onto a beach in the Tunisian resort of Sousse, carrying a Kalashnikov and grenades, and opened fire on terrified tourists. His victims included Elaine and Dennis Thwaites from Blackpool, whose family say their hearts have been smashed into pieces, who heard the coroner conclude today that local police failed to protect them.
There should have been more security guards, there should have been more CCTV cameras, there should have been guards on the beach. If you've got a rifle and you're making that rifle ready to use, you should be prepared to go and take somebody down, whether it's a pistol, which a pistol will still disarm somebody, kill somebody, and yeah, you know, I think they were certainly slow to react, as the coroner has said himself.
The coroner was damning in his criticism of local security and police. The response was, at best shambolic, at worst cowardly, he said. One guard took off his shirt to hide the fact he was an officer. Another fainted through terror and panic. A police unit stopped off to pick up more weapons instead of going straight to the scene. They had everything they required to confront the gunman and could have been at the scene within minutes, the coroner said, adding the delay was deliberate and unjustifiable. The gunman moved from the beach into the hotel that day. This animation shows his movements. He was shooting for 20 minutes. With the exception of 2 Marine guards, no police entered the hotel grounds until he'd killed 38 tourists. 30 of them were British. All, the inquest found, were unlawfully killed. The coroner went through each of the British victims in alphabetical order, described the location where they'd been shot and the nature of their wounds. There were tears in court from some of the family members, and the coroner praised them for their quiet dignity during proceedings, saying their loved ones would have been proud. They are dignified, but many are angry too. 3 months before this attack, 20 tourists were killed in a museum in the capital, Tunis. Lawyers for those who died in Sousse had argued the tour operator TUI didn't warn them of the dangers of terrorism, and the hotel's lack of security put them at risk. The coroner concluded it didn't amount to neglect, to the disappointment of the families.
Following the terrifying events at the Bardo Museum in March 2015, the Tunisian Minister of Tourism issued a letter requiring hotels to improve security measures. Tragically, these steps were not implemented at the Imperial Mahaba Hotel.
Grieving relatives are planning to sue the tour operator TUI, another chapter in this tragedy. It is hard enough grieving for lives cut short by a terrorist, even harder when their families believe they should have been better protected. Tessa Chapman, 5 News.
Well, as we've just heard, families of the British victims are now planning legal action against the tour operator TUI. The inquests were told that despite the escalating terror threat in Tunisia, the holidaymakers weren't warned and that security measures at the hotel had not been improved. Well, today, a TUI executive said sorry. Layla Hayes reports.
They went to Sousse thinking it was safe. What many didn't realise was that in 2015, the threat of a terror attack was growing. Foreign Office advice at the time was of a high threat of terrorism, especially in places visited by foreigners. But travel company TUI continued to send customers to the Imperial Mahaba Hotel and failed to clearly display the advice on its website or brochures. Many of the families say they wouldn't have gone if they'd known.
If I had been provided with the terrorist information, the descriptors, at the time that I'd gone in to book, then I wouldn't have been booking a holiday to Tunisia.
Graham Scott was by the hotel pool when he heard the shooting and hid in a cellar till it stopped. He didn't know anything about the terror threat in Tunisia.
As far as we were aware, it was still safe to travel. Nobody actually had ever turned around to us and say, no, you shouldn't go. Would we have gone if we'd really been given high alert like we had? We probably wouldn't have gone, so we would have been safe.
Outside court, the director of TUI said they now give customers the Foreign Office advice.
Why did you fail to warn customers of the risks?
I think that what we felt was appropriate at the time was in the way that we were giving travel advice, and we've changed significantly since then.
Would you like to apologise to the families?
I have actually just apologised already, so I have said that.
The inquest heard that TUI never assessed security at the hotel and continued to tell customers it was safe.
For them to stand back and say that security was not my problem is astonishing. An innocence was lost in the sands of Sousse at the end of June 2015.
TUI insists their operations have now changed.
But you're very sorry, are you, for what happened?
Yes, we are very sorry.
The families came to this inquest looking for the truth. They now finally have some answers. Layla Hayes, 5 News.
Well, Kirsty Murray survived the attack after being shot in both legs. She believes the gunman only stopped shooting because she was lying in a pool of blood and he believed that she was dead. Since then, Kirsty has had 17 operations and she still lives with the physical and mental scars. She told us her story.
We went into the pool because it was really hot, so we wanted to have a dip, and we were just sort of fooling around in the pool. And then I heard sort of big loud bangs that sounded like fireworks, and I sort of turned to my then partner and said, "It's fireworks." And then there was a gentleman stood next to us in the pool. He screamed, "It's not fireworks, run." And then at this point we were running out the pool and we just saw everyone running. I remember the marble steps towards the hotel, and it just always plays on my mind because obviously soaking wet in a bikini, no shoes on, running to try and find safety, slipping all over the place. There was a woman that worked there, stood behind like the front desk, and she was ushering people, and were led to a stairwell, and then the doors just exploded open, and he was coming up the stairs shooting, and everyone just ran. And we were running to get to the gates to get out of the hotel area, and because the explosion, we were hit by a grenade. I just remember this feeling coming over me that was like, everything felt really heavy, and I could feel like these bee stings on like the back of me, like something was sort of hitting me. There was like this dead bush that was just basically twigs, and I just laid there like behind it and thought, like, I'm going to try and hide. And then I looked towards the front of the hotel, and he was coming out and he was still shooting. I could hear a lot of pleading, a lot of people begging. I could see it all happening and there was nothing that I could do. And I sort of said my goodbyes in my head to like my family, and I just come to terms with it really. And then he walked past me, I think because I'd lost so much blood and I was obviously laying very still because I was scared. So he obviously had thought that he had killed me and walked past. I'm going to make my life as good as what I can make it, because I am lucky that I'm here today. It will always be there, because obviously seeing those things happen, you know, that will never leave you. But I'm going to try, and I'm going to get better physically and mentally, because that's what you do.
Kirsty Murray speaking to us about what happened to her. Let's catch up with Tessa Chapman, who's with me now. And Tessa's been at the inquest. It lasted 6 weeks. I imagine a lot of the stories were like Kirsty's.
The hearings were incredibly emotional. From the personal tributes, you got a real sense of the family lives that have been ripped apart. From the evidence about the circumstances of each death, you often heard statements of partners who watched their survivors die, their partners die, or tried to help them. There have been tales of bravery, of heroism and of utter tragedy. And I think the sad thing for the families today is that they haven't really found a sense of closure. They still feel there is a fight for justice.
Tessa, thank you. Well, later this evening, Matt is going to be here with a special programme on those awful events of June 2015. Terror in Tunisia, The Families Speak Out, is a 5 News Tonight special programme which will start at 6:30. And on our Facebook page, we have advice for travellers who might be worried about where they're going on holiday this year and what checks you should do to make sure your destination is safe. You just search for C5 News. Coming up on 5 News. Payback time and agreement from Sir Philip Green over the black hole in the BHS pension. And the find of a lifetime, the amateur treasure hunters who've struck ancient gold. We'll see you after the break. Hello and welcome back. You're watching 5 News. The former boss of BHS, Sir Philip Green, has agreed to pay more than £360 million of his own money to help fill a huge black hole in the company's pension scheme. The agreement comes nearly a year after the department store went under in highly controversial circumstances. Julian Drucker is with me. Julian, what would this mean for the BHS pensioners?
Well, they will feel like they've waited so long for this. Sir Philip Green has paid £363 million to settle the pension scheme. A huge amount, a voluntary amount, but is it enough? Well, the black hole in the pension scheme was supposedly at £571 million. This is less than that, but Sir Philip stresses that this is a significantly better outcome for the former staff than the nuclear option. That would have been them getting basic compensation from the government-funded Pension Protection Fund. Is it a good deal for the former staff, though? Well, the pensions regulator says it is.
What effectively this means is that we have a set of money received and segregated up front to set up this scheme, and it's the end of uncertainty for those BHS pension scheme members.
Labour MP Frank Field, who has pursued this through a parliamentary inquiry, says he welcomes this. He says it's not the end, though. It's not justice, but it is a milestone, he says. Tonight, Sir Philip Green says the matter is concluded.
Julian, thank you. A breast cancer surgeon has gone on trial accused of carrying out completely unnecessary, life-changing operations on patients after inventing or exaggerating their risk of disease. The jury was told Ian Patterson's motive may have been to earn more money. Let's speak now to Olivia Kinsley from Nottingham Crown Court. What's the court been hearing today, Olivia?
Well, Sian, Ian Patterson is an experienced breast surgeon who worked for more than 30 years in his field. And the court heard today that he was trusted and well liked by his patients. And the prosecution alleged that he abused that trust to carry out unnecessary operations. Between 1997 and 2011, he worked at 2 private hospitals near Birmingham run by Spire. During that time, it's alleged he carried out a double breast removal on a woman who suffered complications and needed 9 96 follow-up appointments. Also a man who underwent a double mastectomy and was so nervous about surgery that he suffered anxiety attacks and needed sedation. Also that he carried out invasive procedures on a young 25-year-old woman who planned to start a family and was left very distressed that she might be unable to breastfeed. The prosecution alleged that he exaggerated the risk of those patients developing breast cancer and that in fact they did not need that surgery at all. In total, he denies 20 counts of wounding with intent. This trial is expected to last 10 weeks.
Olivia, thank you. Nearly 50 years after man last went to the moon, 2 new astronauts are going to pay a visit. They'll be space tourists who've paid a private company tens of millions of pounds for a week-long trip around the moon and back. They'll go as early as next year, and with them, says the firm organising it, they'll carry the hopes and dreams of all humankind. Simon Weigart reports.
3, 2, 1. It's been a long time coming, but space tourism is almost a reality. SpaceX says 2 paying punters will travel around the moon next year. It's a topic which always captures millions of imaginations.
I pretend to be a bird while I'm in like a spaceship like this. I try and fly. So.
Would you want to go up as well?
Yes, because I always wanted to go to space. I want to know how it feels like. I'm type of scared if the rocket crashes or something. Yeah, I'm so scared. Yeah. It's going to be bouncy and fun, and it's like a trampoline.
They're going to have to join the queue. SpaceX says 2 deposits have been paid by private citizens who are not Hollywood celebrities. SpaceX says the cost per person is comparable to a trip to the International Space Station, which comes in at £56 million. The record for manned space travel was set in 1970 when Apollo 13 travelled 249,000 miles. SpaceX estimates its first mission will go between 300 and 400,000 miles. Experts say the project is entirely credible.
They've carried out some remarkable firsts, for example, landing a first stage of a rocket on a floating platform at sea. That's astonishing, never been done before. So SpaceX has demonstrated a capability. The question is, how far does that capability stretch?
It's not all been plain sailing. There was this launch pad accident last year. No one was hurt. And Virgin Galactic had a test flight tragedy in 2014. But it remains the ultimate trip, and it now appears to be within reach if you've got the cash. Simon Weigart, 5 News.
Now it's been confirmed who was responsible for Sunday's embarrassing Oscars gaffe. La La Land. Presenters Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway named La La Land and not Moonlight as winners of Best Picture after being handed the wrong envelope. The firm in charge of the procedure, PricewaterhouseCoopers, blamed Brian Cullinan for the mistake. It doesn't look like much, does it? But this bundle of metal is actually 3 necklaces and a bracelet, all made of Nion solid gold, all believed to be from the Iron Age 2,500 years ago. They were unearthed in a field in Staffordshire by 2 amateur treasure hunters who called the find the Holy Grail of metal detecting. Peter Lane has the story.
Lifelong friends Joe and Mark have spent years searching the Staffordshire countryside with a metal detector, occasionally finding, in their own words, a bit of junk or an old coin. But then, on this spot, came the big one.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah. It is, I think, every detective's
find
dream,
of a lifetime.
to be quite honest with you.
The find of a lifetime, that sums it up.
Yeah, definitely, 100%, yeah. It's the Holy Grail of metal detecting, one of them.
And this is the treasure they unearthed, 3 necklaces and a bracelet from around 400 to 250 BC, the oldest Iron Age gold ever discovered in Britain. Experts think they were made in continental Europe and would have been worn by wealthy, powerful women.
This is really opening up new questions about how society was organised, who were the powerful and important people who were wearing these objects, where did they live, and why are we suddenly finding objects never before seen in Britain that come over from the continent, buried on the slope of a hill up in Staffordshire 2,500 years ago.
It's a mystery.
It is a mystery.
A wonderful one.
It is.
As yet, nothing else has been found on this spot, so why bury them here? Was it an offering to the gods or simply to hide them?
Someone put that in the ground and you guys found it.
Yeah.
2,500
I know, it sounds good, doesn't it? Yeah, it does. When you put it like that,
it is
brilliant.
The gold will be on public display at Stokes Potteries Museum from tomorrow. Now, if you're more interested in hard cash than fascinating history, how much are these worth? Well, that'll be decided in the coming months by a panel of experts. The museum will then have to raise that money, and half of it will go to the landowner and half to the lucky pair who found them. Whatever the figure, they won't be hanging up the metal detector yet. There's more treasure out there, somewhere. Peter Lane, 5 News.
Now, before we go, Matt has joined us. He's got details of that special programme on the Tunisian terror attacks we were telling you about. Hi, Matt.
Hi, Sian, that's right. Yeah, we're going to be looking in more depth at the inquest into the deaths of those 30 British holidaymakers who were killed in Tunisia back in June 2015. I'll be hearing more survivors' stories, and I'll also be speaking to Tunisia's ambassador to the UK here in the studio. I'll be asking for his response to the coroner's damning criticism of the police reaction, at best shambolic, at worst cowardly. That's terror in Tunisia. The families speak out. A 5 News Tonight special at 6:30 this evening, Sian.
Thanks, Matt. That's it for now, though. Claire Nazir has the weather for you next. I'll see you again tomorrow at 5. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.